be good enough to play for Accrington Stanley. Accrington Stanley? Who are they? Exactly.
Mr. Shilling, we found a tea leaf in the kitchen.
Tea leaf?
I'll admit it, it's a fair cap, Gav.
If you've ever shipped 20 assets in a week and still felt invisible, you're not alone. Most marketers are stuck in channel chaos. I bet you've wondered why campaigns that should work just don't. Well, this conversation will save you months of guessing, because the problem isn't your team or your budget. The things we're told to chase, like metrics, are often the biggest distraction from doing work that performs and the least reliable signal when you're trying to build brand awareness. I'm not here to give you tactics on how to squeeze the most efficiency out of your funnel. In this episode, you'll walk away knowing how to think like a creative director. Today, I'm talking to Patrick Collister. He helped build Google's creative think tank, Zoo, and has watched ideas reshape entire brands, even in the worst conditions. This is A Mind for Marketing. I'm Christina Moore, helping businesses connect with audiences to create more prospects through content.
I'm Patrick Collister. I belong to a tribe called the When I. Because I'm semi-retired, it means when I was a creative director at Ogilvy, when I was doing this, that, and the other, and when I was at Google, for example, and that's my background. I was an advertising copywriter. I became a creative director. I ended up doing 7 fun-filled years at Google, heading up the Zoo, which is Google's creative think tank in Northern Europe, which was fun. It was a laugh.
Patrick's career isn't just a list of when I moments. It's a pattern of landing right where the industry is about to shift. And one of the first big jumps happened in the 90s when digital was still the future. So let's go back to the moment he built Ogilvy's first digital creative unit. But I'd love to hear about that transition from copywriting into digital content. How did you find that transition?
Well, that's really interesting. I mean, this would be back in the 90s. I was the creative director of an ad agency called Ogilvy in Mather. And I got a phone call from the marketing director of the Daily Telegraph. And we met for lunch. And he said, look, I don't know anything about this digital business, except it's going to completely change everything. He said, I have no idea how we're going to make money out of advertising in the digital space. So why don't we take a look at it together? And so as a result of that, I created a digital unit inside the agency, which was fascinating. I mean, because these were really early days. So my guys created the first ever branded screen save. And we created the first ever digital interactive ad that was also for Guinness. But honestly, the leaps and bounds within just a few years has been astonishing to look back at it. So again, it's one of those things. I mean, you can't. When you grow, you aren't aware of the fact that you're growing, millimeters every day. You just end up taller. And it's the same with the digital revolution. It just crept over us and bang, suddenly the world was completely different. The only thing I would say is that in advertising, we talked about the digital revolution a lot, but it's actually only in the last couple of years that it has really, really turned advertising upside down. And that, of course, is because of AI as much as anything. But it's also the way advertising is delivered through programmatic. And so we live in interesting times.
Like me, you might assume that Patrick was always at the edge of change. But it turns out those jumps weren't the strategic master plan. They came from something far more familiar to most of us, an event that can be destabilizing and lead to uncertainty.
The Guardian, which was nice, not for any particular reason. They were sponsoring something. Anyway, the journalist said to me, Patrick, look at your career. You've been rather amazing. You were in advertising and then moved into direct marketing just as direct marketing was getting big. And then you moved into digital at Google. He said, how were you one step ahead of the game? And I said, it's because I got fired each time I got sacked, for being a pain in the arse. And then when you haven't got a job, what you do is you look at what's in front of you, So, in many ways, the worst thing that could have happened to me is not being sacked from Ogilvy, because then I wouldn't have discovered direct marketing and I wouldn't have discovered how exciting digital is and continues to be. So I kept getting sacked. And the thing is that you have to put your head on the chopping block.
Why did you get sacked from Ogilvy? Which campaign was that?
It wasn't a campaign that got me sacked. I was the vice chairman and I got a new chairman. And we regarded each other over a chasm of misunderstanding. He couldn't understand why I spent so much of my time talking to clients. And I was talking to clients about their business and about the importance of creativity and sustaining and actually improving their business figures. He thought my job was to just crack the whip over a fairly large creative department. And I didn't. My job was to allow my creative people to do the best they could and to let them free, not to, contain them. It is an interesting thing, all of that. I had my boss at the time was my big boss was Martin Sorrell. And I remember having a conversation with him once about creativity. And I said to him, the thing is, Martin, when you walk around an agency, the creative department, you want to see everyone with their heads down. He said, I want to see people doing that.
Imagining, staring into space and imagining.
I want people thinking, and I even tried banning art directors from having computers. Because when you're an art director, you could just spend hours fiddling and it looks as if you're working. You're not. You're just messing around. I wanted people to think. I wanted people to be able to have the ideas that would then solve the problem.
What type of manager were you or are you?
I tried very hard to there are certain kind of creative director out there who'd make all the decisions. Do you know what I mean? So you'd be shown work and you'd say yes or no to it. And I handed over responsibility for that to the creative people themselves. And that was, in many ways, terrifying for them because it's really a nice feeling that somebody else has made the decision. And suddenly they now had to judge their work themselves. Is it good enough? And so what that meant is they became much more collaborative with the account teams because they say, well, we've got this idea. We don't know if it's any good. And then the account teams would go, oh, God, that's great. But if you did that and the other. So what happened is the work got better because there wasn't this kind of pyramid of creative directors to squash it. It became collaborative in the teams themselves. And I learned from a woman. I got a real lesson in management from an incredible woman called Shelley Lazarus. And she ran Ogilvy worldwide. And what she did was she asked questions. When I was early on as a creative director, I thought my job was to go into a room and make the decisions. And so I'd go in there and I'd testosterone seeping out of every pore. And then I'd walk out of the room and no doubt behind me, people were going, whoa, wanker. Whereas Shelley, would ask questions and then and she'd lead the discussion and people would talk about it. And then at the end of the meeting, everyone would walk out feeling that they'd been part of a decision, part of something. And I thought, oh my God, that's how you do it. And it's called emotional intelligence. And I have to say, most men have got very little of it. Including
it's a skill. It's a skill.
But it's a skill that honestly should be taught.
Patrick helped shape the early digital landscape. But digital didn't just give us new toys. It completely rewired how ideas had to work. And that's where things start to get a little bit messy. I wanted to understand why marketing feels so chaotic for us today, even when information is a click away, and we have access to tens of productivity tools to help us manage.
But in the old days, I'd get given a creative brief, and a big idea was an idea that you could use across television, posters, print, and radio. Now, today, of course, there are so many different channels. Christina, not just social, not just display advertising, but now we've got brand engagement, activation, all kinds of things. Sponsorship. Sponsorship is huge now, and suddenly you've got to have creative ideas that cover all of those things. In addition to which, as a result of probably the financial crash in 2009. We've got marketers increasingly obsessed with the immediacy of ROI rather than long-term brand building. And this is one of the biggest dilemmas and debates in the industry at the moment. Is it performance versus brand? And or how do you make the two sit alongside each other?
So the shift from one big idea to small tactical assets explains why everything feels so scattered. We're drowning in formats and chasing metrics that don't mean much to our human prospects. So if optimization isn't the answer, what is?
Now, the thing is that, repetition in advertising just goes over people's heads. You don't notice an ad that's repeated at you because you never wanted to see it in the first place. You're not going to engage with it. It's a big shock for a lot of marketers to learn that actually no one gives a shit. They really don't. And here's the thing. The Economist reckons that we're subjected to around 3,000 selling messages a day. Google research reckoned it was over 13,000 a day. Now, if I was to ask you if you could remember a single selling message, a single ad from yesterday, you might possibly remember one. And that is a testimony to the fact that we think advertising is shit. And we do everything we can to block it out. Because actually we've got busy lives. We've got other things to think about other than whatever it is that a brand manager is trying to sell us. So when I was a creative director, we used to talk about big ideas. So, a big idea was a thought that could be executed countless times across countless media. The world's biggest brand is Apple. And if you look at Apple's advertising, they're putting films out there, content out there, in which you see characters, people. So you can follow these people. They have identifiable characteristics so that you can, as I say, get to know them. And they have problems. And in all of the TV commercials and the video content they make, the product is central to what's going on. And so shot on an iPhone is a big idea that has now lasted for 10 years. And 10 years ago, it was about some of the amazing photographs you could take. But now it's about the movies you can make. And so shot on an iPhone, it works. They've got some fantastic films in China shot on an iPhone.
Many marketing teams don't know how to make their content cohesive. That's why we've built the Content Power Score. It shows you where your systems fall down so that you can stop pushing siloed content and start offering a consistent message. The link is in the description.
So a lot of marketers are no longer investing in big ideas. They're investing lots and lots of small ideas. What they want to do is to get messaging as far down to the bottom of the funnel as quickly as possible. In the digital space, that actually, because digital advertising is relatively cheap, for a marketer, you can just pay and spray. And that's what people do. Honestly, doesn't it drive you nuts? I bought a pair of Crocs, all right? I bought a pair of Crocs because I'm sad. And all the rest of it. But I bought a pair of Crocs, and no sooner had I bought a pair of Crocs, not from Crocs' own website, by the way, but from another website where they were a little bit cheaper. But then that same retailer, whose name I won't mention, then started following me around the internet with banner ads, offering me the same pair of Crocs for less. I'd already bought them, you stupid bastards. Now, the point is that there is enough of my data swishing around out there for that advertiser and his agency to know I've just bought the Crocs and they need to leave me alone from it. And here's the thing, when I was at Google, I was just absolutely gobsmacked that, most advertising can be personalized now. The data exists for us to, and I don't mean personalized by, hi, Christina, let me sell you, whatever, some tennis shoes today. But actually it's about knowing what your likes and dislikes are. You don't play tennis, but on the other hand, you do aerobics. So now I know I can target you to talk about whatever it might be. Anyway, only 7% of advertisers personalize digital advertising. Means 93% of digital advertising out there is just completely untargeted. AI is the ability now for a couple of assets to be turned into hundreds, if not thousands, of different ads. I was the non-exec creative director of a company called AdLib, founded by an amazing man called Ollie Marlowe Thomas, who came out of Google and way ahead of the excitement about Gen AI. He was at least 3 years ahead. He and his tech director, Ed, started using AI to take assets and to create and serve digital advertising so that it was saving unbelievable amounts of time in studios, because there are 13 at that time, there were 13 different sizes of banner ads that could go on onto a website. So getting a man in a studio to, again, create all of those with the relevant number of pixels was expensive. Anyway, Ollie and Ed found a way of doing this in seconds. And so, 4 years later, they sold the company for 100 million. The only trouble is that the assets that were being taken were then being dispersed senselessly across the internet. And it is senselessly. As the non-exec creative director, I remember one particular brand giving me a press ad and asking us to transpose this press ad into digital display. But the press ad had something like 60 words of copy in it. And I'm trying to say, if you look at your mobile phone and the banner ad at the top of a page there, what are you on?
I do find, and this is my learnings from Apple, that a lot of marketers don't put themselves in the shoes of the consumer. And so you'll find like an ad with 60 words. So five maximum.
Coca-Cola tastes nice. Now, how can I put that into a way that becomes engaging and different and all the rest of it? And suddenly you've got open happiness.
What's really striking in all of this is that we've got all of this information, all of these capabilities, all of these tools, and yet the content, the output is still really lazy and repetitive. And that's got to be really annoying for the people that are at the other end. And how I interpret this is that this is not a tools problem. This is a creative one.
Christine, what is creativity? You tell me. What is it?
I think for me, creativity is being able to observe the world and, because nothing is new, being able to rearrange it in ways that are novel. So you're not necessarily inventing something, as nothing is effectively new, but you're kind of like observing the world, you're taking note. As you said before, you might be even having discussions with the market, and then being able to rearrange things in ways that are novel and inspiring.
No, I quite like that. I would go broader and deeper than that. I'd say creativity is nothing more and nothing less than solving a problem. Now, if you're a marketer, for example, you made me think about LucasAid. When I was a kid growing up, Lucozade came in pint-sized bottles wrapped in orange cellophane, and you gave Lucozade to your kids when they were recovering from colds and flu. But then, of course, in the 60s and 70s, better housing with central heating meant that kids didn't get flu and bad colds all that often, and so sales of Lucozade dropped off. So a really smart marketer looked at the Lucozade proposition, which was recovery, and thought, well, what else can Lucozade help you recover from? And it can help you recover from exertion. So suddenly, we're now into isotonic. So that was, again, as you were saying, somebody observing and making a shift, but not necessarily reinvention of the wheel. But so for me, creativity is nothing more and nothing less than solving a problem. And if you're if you're running a company and you're in trouble for one reason or another, creativity is the way out of it. I mean, here's another example of exactly what I mean. One of the most famous pieces of digital content ever is the Cadbury's Gorilla. Do you remember it?
I do.
So, exactly. I mean, honestly, it's probably over 150 million views now. Well, what happened is Cadbury's were in deep trouble because the CEO, a man called Todd Stitzer, with that marvelous detachment from the real world that CEOs have, because they're chauffeur-driven and they have no idea about real life, was that gave his biannual press conference about Cadbury business and how it was doing. And a journalist in the audience said, "Mr. Stitzer, is it true there's salmonella in one of your count lines?" Because there was a rumor that salmonella was suddenly discoverable in Cadbury's chocolate. And he, in all his wisdom, said, "Salmonella never hurt anybody." Well, as a matter of fact, Mr. Stitzer, it kills people. And so the headline of every single newspaper the next day was salmonella in Cadbury's chocolate. Now, are you going to rush out and buy a bar of Cadbury's knowing that there's a chance it's going to kill you? Well, no. And so sales of Cadbury just went off a cliff. Now, the marketing director was a man called Phil Rumbold. And again, observing and being decisive and all the rest of it, he said, this company is in deep shit unless we do something about it. And so he briefed two highly creative agencies to help him solve a problem. And an agency called Fallon and a very, very clever Argentinian creative called Juan Cabral came up with the gorilla spot. And Cadbury's ran it, and it got all of those tens of millions of views. But I mean, one of the comments on YouTube, that I noticed, somebody said, "I love the spot. It wouldn't make me buy Cadbury's chocolate, though." It wasn't designed to. What it was designed to do was to make you forget that the bastards have been trying to poison you. And in that, it was incredibly successful. And Todd Stitzer, to his credit, did say that at the year end, when the year end figures were released, he said, "For us, it has been the year of the gorilla." That gorilla saved his ass, as they say. But so that's when you're in trouble, creativity is, how am I going to solve this problem? And how am I going to do it? And you're going to have to do something new. You're going to have to do something different, because otherwise the problem is just going to continue.
The Gorilla campaign shows just how fast creativity can rewrite a brand's image. But big ideas don't only come from big crises or big budgets. They start with individuals who see the world a little differently. Patrick even wrote a whole chapter on how to build that muscle for yourself in his book, How to Use Innovation and Creativity in the Workplace.
Creativity is an innate human ability. It's not just a handful of people. It's every single one of us. But the trouble is, creativity requires work. It really does. Yeah, I bet you are just a hub of completely useless knowledge, aren't you?
Yes. No, thanks to podcasts, yes.
Yeah. Well, that's creativity. Because the amazing thing about all that useless knowledge is that suddenly, one day, you're going to bring two things together to have an idea. that you would never have been able to have if you hadn't picked up all of those kind of funny little bits and pieces. Now, the moment you start doing that in your everyday life, just taking an interest in things that are odd and peculiar and all the rest of it, what you're doing is you're just filling up this repository of stuff that you can then fall back on when you really, really need it. And then you can solve a problem. Harvard Business School did a survey of CEO attitudes, and 81% of them said that creativity was the single most valuable asset they look for in their executives. So creativity is about having ideas and then about putting those ideas out there in some form or another to test them. On the other hand, those marketers who are instinctively and intuitively good at it don't remain marketers for very long, because marketing is all about making informed decisions. It's about judgment, exercising judgment. And because most people can't do it or won't do it, those who do don't remain marketing directors for very long. They go into general management. So I haven't looked at it for about, 3 or 4 years. But the last time I looked at it, 13 CEOs of FTSE 100 companies were former marketing directors, which I think is pretty high.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that's even over-indexing.
Yeah, no, it is. And as I say, the reason for that is because you understand that you have to grow a business by talking to your customer base, whoever they may be. And making sure that happens. In 2017, Kraft acquired Heinz. And so Jakob Suschog Kraft is there. So Kraft merged with Heinz. And the first thing that the CEO did was to take the advertising budget of Heinz, of Kraft Heinz, of both of them, and to reduce it so that the total budget for Kraft Heinz was less, about 70% of the Heinz advertising budget for the year before, 2016. In 2019, Kraft Heinz lost $15 billion worth of value when they declared their pre-tax warning that sales had dropped by 2%. 2% of a behemoth like that, we're talking about hemorrhaging business. So what happened, of course, is that the CEO lost his job and they hired a new CEO who had been a marketer himself. And the first thing he did was to start investing in advertising, but not just advertising. He started investing in creative advertising. So he went to creative agencies that were going to deliver creative work that people would notice, primarily an agency in Toronto called Rethink. The evidence is that creative advertising has turned around Heinz's fortunes massively. When Lou Gerstner became the CEO of IBM, I don't know if this story's in my book, but I love it. When he became the CEO of IBM, again, Lou Gerstner was a marketer. He'd been the marketing director, global marketing director for American Express. He then became the CEO of IBM, and IBM was in deep trouble at that time. And Wall Street, the Wall Street Journal was saying that as the new CEO, he needed to break up the company in order to be able to return shareholder value. But he didn't want to break it up into its divisions. And what he said is this company has many wild ducks within it. And by wild ducks, what he meant were people who walk into the company every day, and we all know them. You've worked with them. I've worked with them. People who walk in the morning and they go, I was thinking overnight. And everyone goes, oh, God, were you? Oh, I've had an idea. Oh, no, for God's sake, can you spare it? Don't rock the boat, mate. And he said, these are the people who like the status quo. They don't want change at all. But the wild ducks exist, and they come in and they get shot down. And what he said was, I want my wild ducks. I want them to have ideas. He said, if you're a wild duck and you've got an idea, you take it to your boss. If your boss isn't interested, then you take it to your boss's boss. If she isn't interested, you bring it to me in New York. Anyway, through leveraging the power of ideas within his company, he turned IBM into the biggest consultancy in the world. And it wasn't broken up, and it made a lot of money. And he wrote a brilliant book called The Elephant Must Learn to Dance. That's about applied creativity. And but also from leading from the top, there was a business figure who valued creative people and what they brought to the party.
Thank you so much, Patrick. It's been lovely to speak to you and to get your perspective. Time to review our notes. The industry's obsession with short-term ROI has pushed teams into a corner. More channels, more pressure. But Patrick said none of that matters if people don't care. And people, our audience, only care when the work has a big human idea at the center. Creativity isn't magic. It's problem solving. It's paying attention and collecting those useless bits of knowledge until two of them snap together and unlock something new. And it's a skill anyone can build. The best leaders aren't the most brash in the room. They're the ones who ask better questions. They make space for ideas. They let their teams think instead of react. So as you head into your week, focus on the problem behind the brief, not the deliverables. Notice what's interesting. Ask the questions no one else has thought to ask. Thanks for listening. And if you want to see where your content system is breaking down, check out the Content Power Score in the description. I'm Christina Moore. You're listening to A Mind for Marketing.